The hall glittered with golden lights, tall chandeliers hanging like crowns above the grand ballroom. Laughter and music floated through the air as some of the wealthiest people in the city gathered for the annual charity gala. Expensive gowns, suede, crystal glasses clinked, and polished shoes tapped softly on the marble floor. Maya moved quietly among them, a tray of glasses balanced carefully in her hands. She wore the simple black and white uniform of the catering staff, blending into the background like a shadow. She had worked countless nights like this, smiling politely, keeping her head down, and making sure the guests had everything they wanted. Most of the time, no one really looked at her. To them, she was just another server, but tonight would not be like any other night. On the far side of the hall, Daniel Whitmore, a millionaire businessman with sharp suits and an even sharper tongue, leaned against the edge of the dance floor. His friends circled him, laughing at his every word. Daniel was known for his arrogance, a man who believed money could buy anything: respect, power, and entertainment. As Maya passed by to refill their glasses, Daniel's eyes caught her. Something in his smirk deepened. "Hey," he called, loud, enough for everyone nearby to hear. Maya froze for a moment, then turned politely, lowering the tray slightly. "Yes, sir?" she asked softly. Daniel tilted his glass lazily, eyeing her with amusement. "You've been walking around all night like you own the place. Tell me, do you dance as well as you serve?" A ripple of laughter came from his friends. Maya blinked, confused by the sudden question. "Excuse me?" she asked, keeping her tone respectful. Daniel set his glass down on the table and pointed to the wide-open dance floor. "Go on," he said with mock seriousness. "Show us a few moves. I dare you." The laughter grew louder. Some guests turned their heads to watch, sensing a spectacle about to unfold. Maya's co-workers, standing near the side table, exchanged worried glances. They knew Daniel's reputation. He enjoyed humiliating those he thought were beneath him. Maya's cheeks warmed, but she didn't lower her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing, only looking at him with steady calm. The silence made Daniel smirk even wider. "What's the matter?" he teased. "Don't tell me you're afraid. It's just a dance." His friends chuckled, some already whispering jokes under their breath. The music from the band continued softly, waiting in the background like an unanswered question. Maya's heart beat faster. She had not expected to be called out like this. She had been raised to work with dignity, to respect her job and not draw attention, but she also carried within her a quiet fire, a strength that had been tested many times in life. Daniel's words stung, but more than that, they challenged her pride. She glanced at her co-workers. One shook his head slightly, silently urging her not to give in. Another whispered, "Ignore him." But something inside her shifted. If she walked away now, Daniel would laugh louder, and the shame would not only be hers, it would belong to every person he thought he could mock without consequence. Maya straightened her back. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried across the room. "If you want me to dance," she said, "then I will dance." The laughter faltered for a moment, a few eyebrows lifted. Daniel raised his glass again, clearly entertained. "Well then," he said smoothly, "the floor is yours." The crowd stirred, excitement buzzing through the air. Guests who had been chatting stopped to watch. Some leaned forward with eager curiosity. To them, this was a game, a diversion from the usual speeches and polite dances. To Maya, it was something more. She placed the tray on a nearby table and stepped toward the floor. Each footstep echoed in her ears, though the chatter of the crowd had grown louder. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, some filled with doubt, others with pity. Daniel leaned back with a smug grin, certain that this poor waitress would trip over herself and give him the laugh he wanted. But Maya kept walking, until she stood at the center of the polished dance floor. The chandeliers above seemed brighter here, shining down on her as though testing her resolve. She inhaled slowly, pressing one hand against her side to steady her breath. The band members exchanged uncertain looks, unsure what to play. Maya gave a small nod toward them. "Something with rhythm," she said softly. Her voice carried just enough to be heard, and the band leader, intrigued, lifted his hand. The music shifted. A soft, steady beat filled the hall, gentle at first, like a heartbeat. A hush fell over the crowd. The laughter stopped. Every eye fixed on Maya as she stood still for a moment, her hands at her sides, her posture straight. She could feel her pulse racing, but beneath it was something else: determination. The first step was always the hardest. She let her body move slightly with the rhythm, testing the space, the music, and the silence that surrounded her. People leaned closer, waiting for her to stumble. But Maya did not stumble. Her steps were small at first, almost cautious, but her movements carried a grace that could not be ignored. She turned slowly, the hem of her uniform brushing lightly against her knees. The floor, the lights, the music, it all blended into something larger than the challenge itself. Daniel's smirk began to fade, just slightly. Maya took another step, this time stronger, more confident. Her arms lifted as though telling a story. She was no longer just a waitress standing on the floor. She was something more, something unexpected. The whispers in the room died down, replaced by a quiet tension. Everyone could sense that what was unfolding before them was not the simple humiliation Daniel had intended. It was the beginning of something none of them had foreseen, and as the music carried her forward, Maya's eyes remained steady, not on the crowd, not even on the millionaire who had dared her, but on the truth that lived inside her. She would not be mocked. This dance was only beginning. The first few steps had already changed the air inside the ballroom. What had begun as a cruel dare was quickly turning into something different. Guests who had been ready to laugh now leaned forward in their chairs, eyes narrowing in curiosity. It was as though the entire room had taken a slow, collective breath, waiting to see what would come next. Maya's shoes slid lightly across the polished floor. Her movements were gentle, testing, almost like a whisper. Yet there was a certainty in the way she moved, a quiet confidence that was difficult to ignore. The musicians, sensing her rhythm, adjusted their notes. The soft beat of the drum matched the rise and fall of her steps. For a few seconds, the ballroom was caught between two emotions: the expectation of laughter and the surprise of admiration. People had gathered around the edges of the floor, whispering into each other's ears. Some were doubtful, believing she was only delaying the embarrassment. Others grew strangely still, their expressions softening as though they recognized something hidden in her movements. Daniel, sitting with his friends at the long table, leaned back in his chair, still holding his glass. The smirk had not entirely left his face, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes: uncertainty. He had expected a nervous shuffle, a clumsy stumble, something to make her the joke of the night. Instead, he found himself watching her with a strange mix of interest and confusion. Maya did not look at him. She did not look at anyone. Her eyes stayed focused, steady, as though the room itself had vanished. She had always loved to dance, though no one here knew that. As a child, she would dance in her small living room when no one was watching, moving to the music of old records her mother kept. Life had pushed her into hard work and quiet responsibilities, but the rhythm had never left her heart. Now, standing before the city's wealthiest eyes, she allowed that hidden part of herself to breathe. The silence between the notes deepened. Guests stopped whispering. Even the waiters paused in their work, trays balanced mid-air, their eyes fixed on her. The sound of clinking glasses and soft laughter, the usual background of any gala, was gone. In its place was a stillness, almost fragile, as though the whole hall feared a single sound might break the spell. One woman in a silver gown leaned toward her husband and murmured, "She isn't just dancing, she's telling something." Her husband, who had laughed earlier, said nothing now. His eyes were wide, caught by the grace of Maya's movements. Maya felt the weight of the silence pressing around her, but instead of shrinking, she rose within it. She let her steps grow stronger. Her arms lifted with slow precision, her hands shaping invisible stories in the air. The music responded, growing richer, filling the room with gentle strings and low notes that wrapped around her like a cloak. In that silence, Maya found her power. Daniel's friend, a man with a booming laugh, shifted uncomfortably. "She's actually not bad," he muttered. Daniel shot him a sharp glance, as if reminding him that this was supposed to be a joke, but the man shrugged, his laughter gone. He could not deny what his eyes were seeing. Across the room, Maya's co-worker, an older waiter named Samuel, felt a tightness in his chest. He had known Maya for months, always quiet, always humble, never seeking attention. To see her standing there, shining under the chandelier lights, was like seeing someone reborn. His lips curved into a smile, pride filling his heart. Step by step, the silence grew heavier. It was no longer the silence of doubt, but the silence of awe. People who had looked down at her now looked up, their eyes following every turn, every gesture. The dance was no longer about Daniel's dare. It had become something larger, something unforgettable. Maya felt a strange calm wash over her. Each movement carried a piece of her past, the struggles, the long hours of work, the quiet moments where she held on to hope. Her body spoke the words she had never been able to say out loud. "I am more than what you see. I am not small. I am not invisible." The silence deepened. Even the band, though playing, felt it. Their eyes stayed locked on her, their music softer than usual, as though they were careful not to disturb the story she was unfolding. Finally, Maya spun slowly, her skirt swaying with the motion. She stopped, her face lifted toward the lights, her arms opening wide. The silence around her felt like a pause in time. No one moved. No one spoke. For one long moment, the ballroom held its breath. Daniel lowered his glass slightly, his expression unreadable. He had never been silenced before. Not by a businessman, not by a rival, and certainly not by a waitress. Yet here he was, unable to find a single word. His friends shifted uneasily, unsure whether to laugh or applaud. Then, slowly, like a ripple moving through water, the silence broke. Not with laughter, not with mockery, but with the sound of clapping. It began softly, a single pair of hands near the back of the room. Then another joined, and another. Within seconds, the hall filled with applause that grew louder, echoing off the marble walls. Some people even rose to their feet, clapping with genuine excitement. Maya stood still, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. She had not expected applause. She had only wanted to protect her dignity. But now, as she looked at the faces before her, she saw admiration shining in their eyes. The silence that had once threatened to swallow her had instead lifted her higher. She had turned the hush of humiliation into the hush of respect. And though the dance was far from over, Maya knew one truth already. Daniel's game was beginning to crumble. The applause had surprised everyone, including Maya. She had expected silence, maybe even laughter, but not this. For a brief moment, she stood frozen in the center of the dance floor, her chest rising and falling as she tried to catch her breath. Then the music shifted again. The band, sensing the energy in the room, played a livelier rhythm. The beat was soft at first, then stronger, as though encouraging her to continue. The guests leaned forward eagerly, their eyes following her every move. Maya knew the first steps had only been the beginning. If she stopped now, the moment would fade, and Daniel would find some way to twist it into a joke. No, she could not stop. She had to keep going. She took a deep breath, her feet moving slowly to the rhythm. At first, her steps were simple. Small turns, soft slides, graceful gestures with her hands. But there was a natural beauty in the way she carried herself. Each motion flowed into the next, like water streaming over smooth stones. The guests, who had once doubted her, now grew silent again, but this time with admiration. Their eyes followed the sway of her movements, the gentle rise and fall of her body in rhythm with the music. The elegance was undeniable. A child in the audience tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "She dances like the people on TV." The mother, her lips parted in wonder, nodded but said nothing. Daniel, meanwhile, leaned further back in his chair, his eyes narrowed. He had expected awkwardness, something to laugh at with his friends. Instead, he was watching a waitress command the attention of the entire hall. The thought unsettled him. For the first time that night, his confidence began to crack. Maya's steps grew bolder. She lifted one arm, then spun lightly across the floor, her skirt twirling around her knees. The crowd let out a soft gasp. She landed the spin with perfect grace, her feet settling back into the rhythm as though she had been born to dance. In her heart, Maya felt a memory return. She remembered the first time she had ever danced in public, at a small school recital when she was 12. Her family had cheered so loudly, their claps drowning out her nervousness. That night, she had promised herself she would keep dancing no matter what. Life had been difficult since then, but now, under the glittering chandeliers, she felt that same promise come alive again. She allowed her body to loosen, her movements more expressive. Her hands painted invisible shapes in the air. Her feet tapped with energy, matching the music's growing intensity. She tilted her head back, her face calm yet full of emotion, and for the first time in years, she felt truly free. The audience was spellbound. A woman in pearls whispered to her friend, "She's not just good, she's incredible." A man who had been laughing earlier now found himself clapping softly to the beat. Even the servers paused in their work, smiles spreading across their faces. Daniel's friends looked at each other uneasily. One leaned in and muttered, "She's embarrassing you, Daniel. Everyone's on her side." But Daniel only tightened, his jaw refusing to answer. His pride would not allow him to admit what was happening before his eyes. Back on the floor, Maya's dance built momentum. She moved across the stage with a rhythm that was both powerful and graceful, each step more confident than the last. The band followed her lead, the music swelling with energy. Her co-workers near the wall exchanged looks of awe. Samuel, the older waiter, whispered, "She's showing them who she really is." Indeed, Maya was no longer just a waitress serving drinks at a gala. She had become the center of the evening, her movements weaving a story no one could look away from. She danced with strength, but also with vulnerability, showing her struggle, her pride, and her unshakable dignity all at once. The first steps had been cautious. Now, they carried power. She crossed the floor, her arms spreading wide, her feet landing with sharp precision. Then she slowed, bending slightly as though gathering strength. When the music swelled again, she rose with renewed energy, spinning once more. The crowd gasped again, then burst into applause mid-dance. It was rare at such formal galas for people to break etiquette, but Maya's performance was breaking every expectation. The line between guest and server had blurred, and in that moment, she stood above them all, not through wealth or status, but through undeniable talent. Maya's heart raced, but she did not falter. She knew she was not dancing just for herself. She was dancing for every unseen worker in the room, every person who had ever been underestimated, every soul who had been told they were not enough. The chandeliers glowed above her, their light bouncing across her skin as she moved. The marble floor reflected her every step, making it look as though she were gliding across water. And then something extraordinary happened. The audience began to clap in rhythm, first softly, then louder, until dozens of hands echoed the beat of the music. The sound filled the ballroom like thunder, carrying Maya higher with every strike. Her co-workers clapped the loudest, pride shining in their eyes. Even some of the wealthy guests, people who rarely looked twice at the serving staff, joined in without hesitation. The unity of the applause was overwhelming, like a wave lifting her higher than she thought possible. Daniel gripped his glass tightly, his knuckles pale. He could feel his friend's eyes on him, but he refused to look away from Maya. His plan had failed. The laughter he had wanted was gone, replaced with cheers that did not belong to him. Maya's dance reached a moment of pause. She stood tall, breathing heavily, her arms stretched wide as the crowd clapped in time with the music. Her chest rose and fell, her face glowing with determination. She could feel the room's energy wrapping around her, lifting her spirit higher than ever. The first steps had been gentle, but they had led to this moment, a moment of triumph. And though the dance was far from finished, one thing was already certain. Maya was no longer invisible. The clapping of the crowd echoed through the ballroom like rolling thunder. Maya stood at the center of the floor, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. She could feel the rhythm of dozens of hands guiding her, encouraging her to go further. Her heart pounded, but it was no longer from fear. It was from power. The music swelled again, and Maya moved. This time her steps were no longer cautious. They were bold. She spun sharply, her skirt swirling in the golden light. Her arms sliced through the air, each gesture carrying precision and emotion. The crowd, caught between surprise and wonder, leaned forward as if they feared missing a single detail. It was no longer just a dance. It was a transformation. Every step told a story, of long nights of hard work, of quiet sacrifices, of hidden dreams that had been locked away for years. Maya's body spoke what her voice never could. She was saying, without words, "I am more than what you see. I will not be mocked. I belong here." The band felt it too. They no longer played background music. They played for her. Their instruments rose and fell with her movements, as though she were the conductor of the entire performance. The violin wept with passion, the drums beat like a racing heart, and the piano keys shimmered like falling stars. A hush fell again, not because the guests were waiting for her to fail, but because they were utterly captured. The energy of the room had shifted. At the start, Maya had been a waitress, dared to dance. Now she was the center of the gala, a performer who had stolen every gaze and silenced every doubt. Daniel sat rigid in his chair. His jaw was tight, his fingers pressed against the stem of his glass. He wanted to laugh, to dismiss her, to wave his hand and say she was nothing, but the words would not come. He could feel the shift in the air, the way his friends no longer looked at him but at her. For the first time that evening, he felt small. Maya twirled again, her movements blending strength and grace. She lifted her arms high, then lowered them slowly, her body bending like a tree swaying in the wind. The crowd gasped at the seamless beauty of it. Every movement carried weight, as though she was carving her truth into the very air around her. One guest, a woman in emerald green, whispered with tears in her eyes, "She's dancing her life." Her companion nodded silently, unable to look away. The chandeliers above sparkled brighter, their light scattering across Maya's skin like a crown of gold. The polished floor reflected her, doubling her presence, making her appear larger than life. In that moment, she did not look like a waitress. She looked like a star. Her co-workers along the wall stood straighter, pride shining in their faces. Samuel wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand. He whispered, almost to himself, "She's showing them who she really is." They'll never forget this. The crowd's clapping grew louder, now mixed with cheers. Some even rose from their seats, swept up in the energy of the performance. The gala, meant to be a stiff evening of speeches and polite conversation, had transformed into something extraordinary. Maya could feel the shift in herself, too. At the beginning, she had danced out of defiance, a way to protect her dignity. But now she danced because it was who she was. She had buried this part of herself for too long, hiding it under long hours of work and quiet humility. Tonight, she allowed it to live again. Her steps became quicker, sharper. Her body bent low, then rose high, matching the rise and fall of the music. She spun so fast the audience gasped, then landed gracefully with perfect control. The applause grew thunderous, echoing across the marble walls. Daniel's friends whispered uneasily. One muttered, "She's incredible." Another said, "You've made a mistake, Daniel. Everyone's watching her now, not you." But Daniel remained silent, his pride wounded, his arrogance shaken. He had thought this would be entertainment at someone else's expense. Instead, he was watching his own downfall unfold, step by step. In the rhythm of her dance, Maya lifted her chin, her eyes glowing with quiet fire. She was no longer just reacting to Daniel's dare. She was rising above it, turning his insult into her triumph. With each step, she shed the role of a servant and stepped into her true self. An artist, a woman of strength, someone impossible to ignore. The transformation was complete. The music reached a peak, the violin crying out, the drums beating like thunder. Maya leapt lightly across the floor, her body moving as if weightless. The crowd erupted into cheers, unable to hold their excitement any longer. Some guests clapped above their heads, others shouted words of encouragement. The ballroom once, filled with quiet superiority and hidden cruelty, was now alive with joy. Finally, the music softened, guiding her into slower steps. Maya turned once more, then lowered gracefully to the floor, her arms spreading wide like wings. Her chest heaved as she held the final pose. For a moment, there was silence again. The heavy, sacred silence that came when words were too small for what had been witnessed. Then the applause exploded, louder than ever. Guests rose to their feet, giving her a standing ovation. The sound filled every corner of the hall, shaking even the walls. Maya lifted her eyes, her lips curving into the smallest smile. She had not only danced, she had transformed. The girl who had walked into the gala carrying trays was gone. In her place stood a woman who had taken her destiny into her own hands. And though Daniel sat silently, his pride shattered. Everyone in the room knew the truth. Maya had won. The waitress who had been dared to dance had shocked them all. The thunder of applause rolled through the ballroom like a storm breaking over calm seas. Maya stood in the center of it, chest rising and falling, her skin glowing in the golden light of the chandeliers. She had not planned this moment, had not expected it. Yet here she was, lifted high by the energy of the crowd. People cheered, clapped, and even whistled. Guests who had walked into the gala, expecting only fine food and polished speeches, were now on their feet, swept away by the power of one young woman's courage. But storms are never calm for long. As the ovation continued, whispers began weaving their way through the crowd. "Who is she?" one man asked, his brows raised. "A waitress can dance like that?" another murmured. Some were amazed, others unsettled. Wealthy people were not used to being surprised, especially not by someone they considered beneath them. Daniel sat stiff in his chair, his glass untouched on the table. His face was pale, though he forced a thin smile when his friends looked at him. Inside, however, his pride burned like fire. He had set the stage for humiliation, yet now he was the one humiliated. Every clap, every cheer felt like a hand striking. His pride. His friend leaned closer and muttered, "You've lost them, Daniel. She's the star now." Daniel did not answer. His jaw tightened. His eyes never left Maya. On the floor, Maya bowed slightly, acknowledging the applause. She wanted to stop. Her chest ached from the effort, her legs trembled, but the music had not ended. The band, swept into the moment, lifted the rhythm again, brighter and stronger. The audience clapped along, urging her to continue, and she did. This time her movements carried not only grace but fire. Her steps struck sharper, her arms cut through the air with fierce precision. She spun, she leapt, she landed with perfect strength. The storm inside her heart was spilling out into the room. The crowd roared. Some rose fully to their feet, clapping above their heads. A woman near the front shouted, "Go on, girl!" and her voice carried like lightning across the hall. Maya's co-workers stood proudly along the wall, their eyes shining with pride. Samuel whispered, "She's giving them more than a dance. She's giving them a truth they'll never forget." Indeed, Maya was no longer simply dancing. She was fighting without words, proving without speaking, declaring without shouting. She was saying, "I will not be small. I will not be silenced. I am worthy." The storm outside her was now inside the crowd. Their cheers grew wilder with every step. It was no longer a quiet gala. It had become a celebration. But storms do not only bring admiration, they bring resistance. Among the guests, some faces tightened with discomfort. A few whispered, "This is too much." Another muttered, "She's forgetting her place." Their voices were low, but they carried bitterness. To them, the order of things was being broken, and they could not accept it. Daniel heard these whispers, and they fed his pride. His lips curled into the faintest smirk. If Maya soared too high, he thought, perhaps she would fall harder. Yet as he looked at her, spinning beneath the lights, even he could not deny the truth. She had stolen his night. Maya did not hear the whispers, nor did she see Daniel's expression. She was lost in the storm of music and movement. Her heart beat like a drum. Her body flowed like fire and water together. She had never felt so alive, so unshaken, so free. The band followed her every move, their instruments rising in perfect harmony. The violin wailed, the drums thundered, the piano keys danced like sparks. It was as if the entire orchestra existed, only for her. Maya raised her arms high, then dropped low, her body folding with the rhythm. She leapt again, landing so gracefully that the crowd gasped before exploding into cheers. The marble floor beneath her feet reflected her every move, making her seem larger, brighter, untouchable. Daniel slammed his glass onto the table, the sound sharp. His friends glanced at him nervously, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. He forced a chuckle. "It's just a dance," he said, but the words rang hollow. Inside, his thoughts raced. How could a single waitress turn his game into her victory? How could she hold the entire room while he sat forgotten? His pride, once as tall as the chandeliers above, now felt cracked and fragile. Maya's transformation was complete, and the storm she carried was only growing stronger. As she reached the center again, the music reached its peak. She spun faster than before, her skirt flying like a wave. The crowd clapped louder, their rhythm almost shaking the walls. It was no longer applause. It was thunder, and when she stopped, striking a powerful pose with her arms wide, the storm broke. The applause was deafening. People rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, cheering. Some even stamped their feet against the marble floor. The ballroom was alive, every corner vibrating with energy. Maya stood tall, her chest heaving, her face glowing with sweat and pride. She looked around, not for approval, not for praise, but for truth. And she saw it. The crowd's eyes were not mocking. They were shining. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Daniel sat in silence, his face dark, his pride shattered. The storm had risen, and he was at its center, not as its master, but as its victim. Maya, the waitress who had been dared to dance, now stood as the queen of the night, and the storm she had unleashed would not be forgotten. The music softened, its intensity fading into gentle, flowing notes that filled the ballroom like a calm after a storm. Maya's chest heaved as she slowed her movements, her arms lowering gracefully, fingers brushing the air lightly. The audience, still on their feet, clapped softly in time with the delicate rhythm, as if honoring the story she had told without words. Maya could feel the energy in the room still thrumming, but her focus had shifted inward. Every step she had taken, every turn and leap, had brought her here, to a place of quiet triumph. She was no longer dancing for anyone else. She was dancing for herself. The chandeliers above shimmered like distant stars. Their light reflected off her skin, giving her an almost ethereal glow. Her uniform, once simple and plain, seemed to belong to this stage now. It no longer marked her as a waitress. It marked her as a woman who had claimed her moment. Her co-workers, Samuel and the others, watched in awe from the side. Samuel wiped his eyes, feeling a deep sense of pride swell in his chest. He whispered softly, "She's more than we ever knew. She's incredible." Maya's steps became smaller, slower, more deliberate. She moved toward the center of the floor, her face calm, her eyes steady. Every movement was purposeful, every gesture precise. The dance was reaching its conclusion. She wanted it to linger, but she also wanted to leave a mark that would not fade. The crowd watched silently, mesmerized. The room had transformed from a place of social expectation into a stage of revelation. Each person, no matter their wealth or status, felt the emotion Maya carried with her. They had begun the night expecting glamour and entertainment. Now they had witnessed courage, strength, and heart. Daniel, still seated, shifted uneasily. His arrogance had crumbled with each step she had taken. Every clap, every cheer, was a silent accusation against his plan to humiliate her. He had underestimated her. He had been blind to her strength, her dignity, and her fire. Maya did not look at him. She did not need to. Her eyes swept across the audience, catching glimpses of admiration and respect in their faces. Some were smiling warmly, others had tears in their eyes. She could feel the love of the moment, the shared awe, like a ripple moving through the room. Slowly, she lifted her arms one last time, letting the music guide her to the final pose. Her feet landed softly on the marble floor, her body bending slightly, chest lifted, head held high. The silence that followed was electric. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Every eye was fixed on her, every heart in the room connected to the story she had danced. Then, as if on cue, the applause returned, but this time it was different. It was deeper, louder, and full of genuine admiration. People cheered with their entire being, some stamping their feet, some whistling, some clapping above their heads. It was a celebration of courage, of talent, of triumph over expectation. Maya bowed lightly, her smile soft but confident. She had done it. She had turned Daniel's cruel dare into a declaration of her strength. She had shown the room, without saying a word, that dignity and talent could shine brighter than wealth or arrogance. Her co-workers rushed forward, surrounding her with smiles and quiet congratulations. Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder, whispering, "You were amazing, Maya. They'll never forget this night." Maya nodded, feeling a warm sense of fulfillment wash over her. She had danced not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. She had taken a moment that was meant to belittle her and transformed it into something unforgettable. Even Daniel, sitting rigid in his chair, could no longer hide the truth. He had been defeated, not by force or argument, but by courage, grace, and the undeniable power of one woman's confidence. His friends shifted nervously, unsure how to react. Some clapped politely, but their eyes betrayed awe, grudging admiration, and a silent acknowledgement of her victory. Maya stepped down from the center of the floor, her movements calm and composed. She returned toward the edge, allowing the room to settle into the afterglow of her performance. She could hear murmurs of praise, people talking quietly among themselves about what they had just witnessed. The gala had changed, and she had changed it. A young girl near the front whispered to her mother, "I want to dance like her someday." Her mother smiled, nodding, tears glistening in her eyes. "You can," she said softly. "Anyone can." Maya allowed herself one last glance around the ballroom. She did not see the millionaire who had dared her anymore. She saw the audience, her co-workers, the people she had inspired. This moment was hers and theirs. As the band played its final notes and the applause continued, Maya felt a quiet pride settle in her chest. She had faced a challenge, risen above it, and transformed not only the night, but also the way people saw her. She had proven that courage, talent, and self-respect were stronger than arrogance, privilege, and expectation. The gala slowly returned to its rhythm. Guests began to settle back into their seats, talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. The air was lighter now, filled with admiration and respect instead of shallow entertainment. Maya's name was on everyone's lips, and for the first time, she felt truly recognized, not just for her work, but for her spirit. She smiled softly, the exhaustion of the dance mixing with the triumph in her heart. This was her final note, her closing statement. She had danced her story, and now it would live in the memory of everyone who had seen it. Daniel quietly left the table, his head down. He could not face the applause, the admiration, the truth. Maya had won, not with money, not with cunning, but with something far more powerful, her heart, her courage, and her talent. And as Maya walked back to her co-workers, her steps light and steady, she knew one thing clearly. The dance would not be forgotten, the lesson would remain, and she had forever changed the night. Maya had turned a cruel dare into a triumph that would echo long after the music ended. She had found her power, shared it with the world, and proved that respect and dignity could shine brighter than any chandelier or fortune in the room. The gala was winding down. The golden chandeliers dimmed, casting softer light over the marble floors. Guests had returned to their tables, some still buzzing with the memory of Maya's performance. The applause, cheers, and excitement of the night lingered like an electric hum, and Maya could feel it deep in her chest. She sat at the side of the hall, sipping a glass of water, her uniform damp with sweat, her hair slightly loose from all the spinning. Samuel, her older co-worker, leaned down and whispered, "You were amazing, Maya. Everyone will remember this night." She smiled, tired but glowing, knowing he meant every word. Across the room, Daniel Whitmore was silent. He had not left his chair since the dance ended. The smug arrogance that had been his armor earlier was gone, replaced with something he had rarely felt before: humility. Though he tried to hide it, he knew the night had changed him, even if he didn't want to admit it. Maya allowed herself a moment of reflection. What had started as a simple dare had become a turning point. She had danced not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove to herself that she mattered, that her strength and talent could shine even in the face of arrogance and doubt. Her co-workers, gathered around her, smiling proudly. Some offered compliments, others merely nodded in silent admiration. Samuel patted her shoulder gently. "You didn't just dance tonight," he said softly. "You reminded everyone here that dignity, talent, and courage matter more than wealth or status." Maya looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the room. "I only did what I had to," she said quietly. But inside, she felt a swell of pride she had rarely allowed herself to feel. She had taken control of the narrative of her life, even if only for one night. Word of her performance had begun spreading even before the gala ended. Guests whispered among themselves, sharing her story with anyone who would listen. Some had even taken out their phones to capture the memory. Maya realized with a quiet thrill that this was just the beginning. Opportunities, invitations, and recognition might follow, but she knew that her worth was not dependent on their approval. She had already proved it to herself. Daniel finally rose from his chair, his movement stiff. His friends looked to him, expecting a remark, some kind of joke to reclaim the evening. But Daniel's expression was unreadable. He walked toward Maya, each step measured. The room watched, curious, wondering if confrontation would follow. When he reached her, Maya stayed seated, her back straight, her head high. Daniel stopped a few feet away, clearing his throat. He hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. Finally, he said, "You were remarkable tonight." The words were simple, but they carried weight. For Maya, it was enough. She nodded politely, not needing more. Daniel's acknowledgement, though long overdue, was no longer the point. The point had always been her own courage and strength. She rose, smoothing her uniform and taking a deep breath. The night had changed more than just her. It had changed the atmosphere of the gala, the expectations of the guests, and even the arrogance of a millionaire who thought he could belittle someone and remain unchallenged. As she walked toward the exit, Maya felt something shift within her. No longer just a waitress, she carried herself with a quiet authority. Her steps were lighter, her heart stronger, and her spirit braver. The applause, the cheers, the admiration, these were symbols of the night, but the true transformation was inside her. Outside, the cool night air met her face, carrying a sense of freedom. She inhaled deeply, the city lights sparkling around, her like stars. She realized that this was only the first step of many. She had a gift, a voice, a presence, and she could no longer hide it. In the weeks that followed, opportunities began to emerge. Invitations to perform, to teach, to share her talent came from places she had never imagined. Maya accepted some, politely declined others, but every experience reminded her of the night she had stood tall on that dance floor. She had proven to herself that courage was stronger than fear, that dignity was stronger than mockery. Her co-workers celebrated with her, proud not only of her skill but of her courage. Samuel, with a proud smile, said, "Maya, tonight you didn't just dance. You inspired everyone who watched. You made them believe in respect and talent, no matter where it comes from." Maya simply smiled, knowing the truth of his words. Daniel, though initially humbled, eventually sought to learn from the experience. Though he remained wealthy and influential, the arrogance that had defined him at the gala had softened. He realized that power and money were meaningless when faced with integrity, talent, and self-respect. Maya never sought revenge, nor did she wish to humiliate anyone. Her victory had been quiet but undeniable. She had risen through grace, strength, and determination, turning a cruel dare into a lesson for everyone present. Months later, the memory of that gala remained vivid in the minds of those who attended. People still whispered about the night the young black waitress had danced and stunned the entire room. Maya herself remembered the moment with pride, but also with humility. She had not only danced for herself, she had danced for anyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or doubted. And in her heart, she knew the greatest reward was not applause or recognition. It was the knowledge that she had claimed her own power, honored her own talent, and stepped into her true self. The night had begun with a dare. It had ended with a revelation. Maya had transformed not just the room, but herself. And now, every time she danced, every time she moved to a rhythm, she carried that night inside her, a reminder that courage and dignity could turn even the smallest challenge into a new beginning. Maya walked into the city streets, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. She smiled softly, knowing the world had changed for her, and she had changed for herself. The future was wide open, and she was ready. She was no longer invisible. She was unstoppable.